In a quiet suburban neighborhood, nestled between rows of neatly trimmed lawns and picket fences, lay the backyard of the Thompson family. It was a typical neighborhood, with kids riding bikes down the streets and parents chatting over white picket fences. But there was something different about the Thompsons' backyard. It was a place where reality seemed to blur with imagination, where the ordinary became extraordinary, and where the rules of the universe bent like a blade of grass under a child's playful foot. One sunny afternoon, young Tommy Thompson was playing in his backyard, lost in a world of his own creation. His imagination was a wellspring of adventure, and his backyard was his kingdom. Armed with a stick that doubled as a sword and a makeshift cape fluttering in the breeze, he fought imaginary dragons and rescued invisible princesses with the fervor of a young knight on a quest. Meanwhile, inside the cozy Thompson household, Mrs. Thompson was preparing lunch in the kitchen. She glanced out the window and smiled at the sight of her son's antics. But as she went about her chores, a nagging feeling tugged at the corners of her mind. It was a feeling she couldn't quite shake off, like a shadow that lingered just out of sight. After a while, Mrs. Thompson decided to check on Tommy. She called out his name as she stepped into the backyard, but there was no response. Puzzled, she scanned the yard, but Tommy was nowhere to be seen. Panic began to bubble up inside her, and she called out louder, her voice tinged with worry. Still, there was no sign of Tommy. Frantically, Mrs. Thompson searched every nook and cranny of the backyard, but her son was nowhere to be found. She called her husband, Mr. Thompson, who rushed home from work to join in the search. The neighbors came out to help, combing through the neighborhood in a desperate attempt to find the missing boy. Hours turned into days, and days turned into weeks, but Tommy remained missing. The police were called in, and the entire town rallied together in a massive search effort. Flyers with Tommy's picture were plastered on every lamppost and storefront, but despite their efforts, there was no trace of him. As time passed, the once vibrant Thompson household became shrouded in a veil of sorrow. Mrs. Thompson was inconsolable, her days spent in tears as she clung to the hope that her son would return. Mr. Thompson tried to stay strong for his wife, but the worry etched lines of exhaustion on his face. One night, as Mrs. Thompson lay awake in bed, her mind tormented by thoughts of her lost son, she heard a faint sound coming from the backyard. It was a soft, melodious tune, like the tinkling of a music box carried on the wind. Heart-pounding, she got out of bed and crept to the window, peering out into the darkness. In the moonlit backyard, she saw a faint glow emanating from the old oak tree at the far end. Intrigued and filled with a glimmer of hope, she ventured outside, following the ethereal light. As she approached the tree, the glow grew brighter, illuminating the tree's gnarled branches like a beacon in the night. Reaching out tentatively, Mrs. Thompson touched the rough bark of the old oak tree. As her fingers made contact, she felt a surge of warmth spreading through her, and the tree seemed to shimmer and shift before her eyes. Suddenly, a doorway appeared in the trunk of the tree, outlined in a soft, golden light. Without hesitation, Mrs. Thompson stepped through the doorway, her heart pounding in her chest. On the other side, she found herself in a place that defied logic and reason. It was a world bathed in a surreal, dreamlike glow, where the laws of physics seemed to take a back seat to the whims of imagination. In the distance, she saw Tommy, sitting on a swing that hung from a branch that reached up towards the starlit sky. He was swinging gently back and forth, his face illuminated by a serene smile. Mrs. Thompson called out to him, her voice filled with a mix of relief and disbelief. Tommy turned towards her, his eyes twinkling with a joy that she had thought she would never see again. "Mommy!" Tommy exclaimed, jumping off the swing and running into his mother's arms. They embraced tightly, tears streaming down Mrs. Thompson's cheeks as she held her son close. For a moment, time seemed to stand still, and the worries and fears that had plagued her for so long melted away in the warmth of her son's embrace. As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, Mrs. Thompson realized that this place was unlike anything she had ever known. It was a place where the boundaries between reality and imagination blurred, where dreams took on a life of their own, and where the impossible became possible. Together, mother and son explored this strange and wondrous world, encountering magical creatures and breathtaking landscapes at every turn. They laughed and played, reveling in the joy of being reunited once more. And as they journeyed through this surreal realm, Mrs. Thompson knew in her heart that they would never be truly lost again, for they had found each other in a place where anything was possible,